Oh, this is the Moringa for Life thermal compost demonstration. We're at Brian Dahl's house, and he's graciously allowed us to do this composting here. It'll be to his benefit because he'll be able to use it. Behind me, you'll see we have all these different supplies of inputs. There's mulch, there's manures, there's leaf, there's paper, there's kitchen waste, there's moringa leaf. Oh, a wheelbarrow of moringa. We'll take the leaf, and this will be our high nitrogen. And there's ground up greens. So I just want to show the preparation for the hot compost. We are gathering materials for that, and this is the green, so this is a nitrogen component, green, and I'm going to be breaking that down pretty well. The smaller the better. And here is a bucket of it. Those are the stems that will go into the static pile, and then we have actually lots of it, and then we'll be gathering what's dried and already dried. That's a brown, and the green is a green. So the brown is a carbon, but if we clip it and it turns brown from being green, it's still a green. So it's one of the kind of unusual things to have to remember when you're looking at building your compost pile. What's a green, what's a brown? So if it's green when you cut it and it turns brown, it's still a green. If it dries on the plant, or you're raking leaves up that had fallen when they were brown, that's a brown. So there you see it's broken down pretty good. All that creates more surface area for the bacteria to go in and work on that. So all of these things are inputs into the thermal compost. There's also in this also carbon to nitrogen ratios. So it's all worked out for almost every ingredient in a compost is what the carbon to nitrogen ratio is, so you can see where that scale is. More carbon, more nitrogen. And we want to make a fungal dominant thermal compost. In order to do that, I have also a fungi inoculant, and I'll explain that in a bit. So we have 4 ingredients to every compost. There's, soils. It's listed in here too. We have carbons, nitrogen, water, and air. And these are important because the aerobic bacteria needs that in the habitat. So we're also going to go over what is the moisture level, so it's not too dry, it's not too wet. If you were actually getting certified by Dr. Ingham on composting, you would have to prepare a bacteria dominant pile and a fungi dominant pile based on the percentage of the inputs, and it's by weight. And so everything would be weighed. This is one of the things I had to do, weigh every ingredient and determine. So high fungi is 25% nitrogen, high nitrogen, 35% nitrogen, and 45% carbon. So the difference between high nitrogen and nitrogen is greens, high nitrogen are your manures. Chicken manure, and it's also a part of this of how to use chicken manure. Chicken manure is a high nitrogen, and moringa leaf is a high nitrogen. With chicken manure, you have to really compost that for about 6 months because it burns. It's very hot, and it will promote anaerobic bacteria because chickens are omnivores, so they're not just eating vegetables like the horse manure we have and the goat manure that we have. Those are vegetable eating animals. A chicken eats anything, and so that manure has to be composted. You cannot compost any manure from animals that eat meat. You also want to avoid any animal products, so dairy and meat and fish, and those things have other bacteria and they can go anaerobic quickly. They can be composted, but not in a thermal compost. So those are the parameters. And then we're going to talk about turning the pile. So there's a specific way once it starts to heat up. And the process is going to be, we're going to layer it with all these different things while we're putting water. And then once we have all these layers in here, we're going to turn it. So if you recall that in the introductory to composting, you will have seen this layering effect and get basic information about a compost. But the thermophilic compost is different because we're putting these ingredients in here so that it will heat up. And the temperature we want it to heat up to is 130 to 155 degrees. And we want to keep it at that high heat for 3 days in a row. If it doesn't heat up to 130, you have to put more nitrogen. You have to heat it up. If it starts to heat up really fast and goes past 155, you're at 160, you got to turn the pile and cool it down. You're going to add carbon. So you're monitoring it and taking the temperature. We have a big compost thermometer. And so that's the thermophilic process. It's a very fast process. You need a lot of monitoring. But what you end up with is a habitat. That's what we're creating, a concentrated habitat for the microorganisms that are in there reproducing. That's what's making the heat. And if it starts to cool down, you know that there's not enough bacteria there, microorganisms reproducing, because all organisms heat up in that reproductive act, even humans, right? So that's what's actually causing the heat, is that reproductive action. So you want to be monitoring that and keeping it at that high amount. So that creates a concentration of all of the nutrients, and the nutrient cycling is happening in here in a concentrated way at a high temperature, and it's becoming a concentrate. So that compost can then be diluted out. Then it starts to cool down, and you'll see that it'll just start to cool down. And there's nothing to do. You're not going to try to heat it up again because most of the food has been eaten, or maybe even all of it, and the organisms are just going to go dormant. So that's what happens in the compost pile. Then you're going to let it cure, and the curing time can be 2 weeks to a month, even longer. It will hold. You know, you'll still have that. They'll just be dormant until they get air and water. So once, and especially water, because all microorganisms are floating in their own little bubble of water. And when that water sinks down to nothing, they can't maneuver. So they're just in a waiting stage. And we know that microorganisms can be in that waiting stage for a very long time. Can be decades. So that's what we're doing here. Then we're also going to talk about turning the pile. And I have a sheet that's going to show the way to turn a pile, kind of color-coded, because once you have that pile, it's heating up mostly in the middle. And the outer is a little bit hot, and on the very outside, it's not hot, probably at all. But the inner part is heating up, and that's where the pressure is, because we're putting more than a cubic yard, because it will sink down into a smaller pile. We want to end up with the cubic yard. So we're starting out bigger. When we put this in, it's a lot of fluff and air. And so when you turn it, you want to make sure that you turn it so that the outside of the pile is now on the inside of the new pile, and the inside of the pile is now on the outside of the new pile. And so that's how to turn it. And sometimes you'll even see an area between the outer part and inner part. There's sometimes a layer. And there was a video in the introduction to composting where there was a group of college students, and they were building this, and they did a really good job showing how this is done. They used other things. There's water inside these bags. These have different bedding. This is goat manure and goat bedding, and that's been wetted, and the cardboard has been wetted overnight. In that cardboard box is a cardboard that we let wait. So that's a carbon, right? Those things that are dead are carbons. The things that are alive are the nitrogens, and that's in those back areas, although coffee grounds is a nitrogen. So that's it in a nutshell. We're going to start to build it, and I'll stop and explain things at different times, but you'll see as we go. Okay? And these will be pages that can be downloaded as part of the course. I'm going to open up my inoculated fungi pile. kept under plastic and then under cardboard. And so you can see all the white filament there. And go under. So what this is, and I think I have to go to the other side. So you can see this is all how I've gotten fungi to grow all in there, so that now I can take this and put it in my pile. Alright, so I'm going to go over a little bit about the inoculant, and this is something that's easy to do. It takes not a lot of effort, because what we always want is a fungi dominated pile, and the way to do that is to do an inoculant. So what I have here, and I have some little clips of when I gathered this, if you can, how close I can get to show this white part, these filaments that are there. There's more, all of this white fuzzy filament that you see here, and here's some more. All of this is from this fungi inoculated pile. This is a really good example right here. So there's a lot of ways to do it. I do have a little video clip of a guy doing it. He does a really good job showing, because there's a formula. I mean, you can do this by taking some compost and then some good thermophilic if you can, and then some soil from a forest floor with a variety of trees, and then oat, like oat flour. And then you wet that down just slightly, and then you cover that and put it in a dark place, and after 3 days it will have started to produce fungi populations. The way I did this, and the way I do mine, I have a mulch pile, and whenever I walk around, and especially in the winter, I see mushrooms growing, the fruiting body. I gather all that up, and I dig down, 6 inches if I can, all the way around, and I put that inside that mulch pile. That mulch pile is kept damp and dark, so there's plastic over that to hold that moisture in and to make that habitat for fungi. And so this is from that, plus I additionally had a big bag of sesame seed, and so I just put that in there, and more water, and I gathered soil from different places where there had been mushrooms, that I knew that there had been mushrooms, and even right now there's a couple of places where there are mushrooms, there's a fruiting body. So all of that got put in there, and then I put cardboard over that, wet all of that, put the plastic over that, and then that was about 4 days ago that I did this additional one, but ongoing, that soil, or that compost, had a lot of different microorganisms, specifically fungi. And so whenever you go around, you cut up mushrooms and you throw the stem away, put that into your fungi pile, right? You're going in the forest and always have a plastic bag, because if you see fruiting body, you want to get that, because the key is diversity. That's why we have so many different kinds of ingredients, is because just like us, microorganisms like diversity. So we're going to empty all these out, and then you'll see what we have here. But this will get put in at different times in small amounts, and then as we're building this. I just wanted to explain what this was specifically. All right, so you see the progression, how it's going. And kind of look at the materials we have, and we are not halfway, but we're getting close. So you see all these layers that are coming in here. Some of the things that don't break down, we're going to sieve out as well. So some of this leaf has also branches in it. So we're going to screen your compost when you get that far. The other thing I have, and I mentioned, is mycorrhiza. So mycorrhiza can be added. It's already a prepared product that you can buy. I'm going to be putting that in at the time as we're doing layers when we've turned it, so that this is throughout. So that's a new thing.
Here we go.
So we've got somewhat of a pile and a lot of layers in there and some falling to the sides, but it's all going to be collected up, and that's about, if he measured, a little bit more than 3 feet, but we ideally want to be closer to 4 feet when we start, because a lot of that is air, and in a day it'll drop. So we want to end up with a cubic yard.
Here we go.
So, when you live in a really hot place, it's also good. Ended up in the dark, but it's nice and cool. When thing let our cage let go, so we had to kind of reconfigure and refill it. So it's twice mixed, and you see that's about a 3 foot in diameter, so it's taller than 3 feet tall, and that's what you want because this is going to compress down. Like I said, this is mostly air. And so to take the measurement, I have 2 thermometers. One I use and I just put right in the middle and it stays there. So in the morning I just check that. And you want to use your hand. If you push this is easily broken. So that you're going to take a reading there, and about midway down and all the way in, you're going to take this temperature and you let it sit. Takes a couple of 30 seconds or a minute. It's not going to register anything now. It's cold. I can tell you, it doesn't even register anything. So you're going to take that measurement, the measurement in the center all the way down, and then pick another measurement, like on the other side, just so you have a good indication of your pile. You can't get it in. You gotta find a place because it's hitting something. Yeah, it's hitting. This is easy right here. Okay. All right. So then you're going to take those 3 temperatures, add them together, divide by 3, so you have an average, and that's what the heat of your compost pile is. And you keep a log with the date. I usually list the ingredients so I can know if I have trouble or if it's a really good pile, I want to reproduce that with all of those ingredients. So I have a log and I keep the ingredients and the date, and then I put 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Sometimes everything doesn't go so well, and you have to troubleshoot and see if it doesn't heat up. You have to add green. If it heats up really fast and it gets 55 to 160, too hot, you have to turn it, even if it's the first day. So it doesn't matter, you're not going to just keep the temperature and keep it at 160, let it go to 165. You're anaerobic. So you just want to keep that temperature, so if it goes 160, you're going to turn it no matter what day it is. And then once you turn it, you're starting over on that section. Maybe that's the 3rd time or the 2nd time you've turned it and it got hot like that. If it was the 3rd day or the 2nd day, you go back to 1. And you're going to have it be at that temperature. It's going to get up to 130 to 155. And then you're going to turn it on the 4th day from there. So it's a little bit of a technique to figure it out, but it's great work. It's a great workout. You don't have to go to the gym. A lot of farm workouts that people could do. Turning a mulch pile is one of them. And I remember my daughter had a friend over and he wanted to help me. And I said, well, I could use your help turning a compost pile. He was in wrestling at the college level. So I brought him back to the compost pile. We started to turn it. And he was like huffing and puffing and had to take a break. And he said to me, this is only about probably 4 or 5 years ago. He said, oh, I have to change my opinion of you. You can do a better workout than me. And I'm like, so much older, but I'm so used to doing it. And it's a different kind of a workout than what he's used to. And he's just like, oh, I thought I was in really good shape. So one of those things, you get good at it, the more you do it. So there's our compost. So we'll check in and Brian's going to keep the temperature and then we'll see if there's troubleshooting to do with this. And then hopefully in 15 to 18 days, we have a really beautiful compost, thermophilic compost. So that's the heating up because we have these ingredients and we have fungi dominant because we put a lot of fungi food in here. Plus I put mycorrhiza, then I did my inoculant, right? So all of these measures, even if I don't know exactly, I know that I've done more for the fungi side than the bacteria. So here you have it. This was a wonderful date. Think about it. Guys, you might have some farm gals who would really love a compost date.
Why go to a movie when you can do something like this?
Oh, I don't know if you can see you. You're kind of hidden.
That's okay. I'm up in the tree anyway.
So I wanted to thank my husband. This was a labor of love. He just comes along sometimes and just offers his help and his muscle. So whenever you have people in your life who are helping you, make sure that you acknowledge them, take care of them.
Excuse me.
So last but not least, we've wrapped it up in a tarp. This is called putting your compost to bed. And you're just going to keep that heat in there, get that darkness, because when you're under a tree, there's shade. It's not all full shade throughout the day. There'll be some sun in here because you do want to use the sun for heating it up. But you want to close that up to retain the moisture and also to keep it dark because that fungi like that dark habitat. Bacteria too. So you're just really containing that. And if you have critters or like raccoons and possums, you might have to wrap this up even more because they'll come in and want to get in here. If you had animal parts, you would have rats. So no animal parts are in here. And even you can't tell from the smell, but we had a lot of decomposing things that were in here. But as we turn it, it just smells like a rich coffee from the coffee grounds. But it should not smell foul. Foul smelling, vinegar, gasoline smelling, that's anaerobic. And so you want to pay attention as you're doing this to make sure you're not having a smell. You'll have some smell because things are rotting, but it should not be like you can't, whoa, something's gone bad here. And you'll know it from the temperatures because anaerobic heats up. So wrap it up, get it into darkness, retain that moisture, and you could fortify this for keeping creatures out.